Feminism. It's a word that divides opinion. I myself am no stranger to voicing my own opinion when it comes to it. Named Merriam-Webster's 2017 Word of the Year, feminism is defined as the theory of the political, economic and social equality of the sexes. Feminism of the 60s fought for women's sexual liberation, but it can sometimes feel like contemporary feminism is over-politicising women's sex lives and over-policing them. For some, feminism is a movement for women's freedom, away from the trappings of sexist stereotypes. For others, contemporary feminism has turned into little more than a fashion statement, with no bearing on most women's everyday lived experience. Following #MeToo, the viral sharing of women's experience sparked by the Harvey Weinstein scandal, feminism has enjoyed a renewed fame. But you might be surprised to find out that a recent YouGov survey put the number of women identifying with feminism at just 34%. And the Fawcett Society, a feminist campaign group that is well known, put it at 7 to 9% of women identifying with the F word. So what is it? What is it about contemporary feminism that isn't washing with most women? I've come to ask someone who does subscribe to contemporary feminism, outspoken journalist and author Rebecca Reid. Okay, Rebecca, let's talk about the F word, feminism. Tell me why you identify as a feminist today.
Major reason I identify as a feminist is that I believe in the sort of definition of it, which is that we believe in the equality of people regardless of their sex or gender.
Well, because some people argue that it's putting women above men, but is that kind of misconception of feminism?
Yeah, there's a very right-on phrase, which is that when you're used to dominance, equality feels like deprivation. I think some of it is that there's a misconception that feminism means hating men or being against men, and that's really, well, if that's your feminism, you're doing feminism wrong. And also I think there's a perception that feminism is very angry, it's very militant, it wants to ban things. There's also a perception that feminism hates sex, that it hates fun, that it hates short skirts, and that's certainly not my experience of feminism. I think there are probably more people who live their lives in a feminist way and agree with a lot of the ideas of feminism than call themselves feminist.
What would you say are the key points that feminist politics argues for today?
Sexual harassment and in the workplace. Childcare is a massive one. I mean, that's the pay gap's a thorny issue, but the pay gap that is most accepted is the pay gap between women with children and women without children. And the fact that having children tends to scupper your career is a major feminist issue. There's also a lot of my feminist contemporaries, and myself included, feel that one of the big things for feminism is male mental health. Because we believe that the system that oppresses women also oppresses men, and that a lot of the issue with the criminal suicide rates in this country are born of men being obliged to be tough, strong providers.
And how would you respond to the argument, I think an argument that I've made when we've had discussions about this, that feminism is seen as a kind of middle-class club, that it only serves the interests of a certain section of society?
So I think that's a really interesting point, and my frustration, actually this isn't something that you do, but I've heard other people suggesting that working class women are much tougher and they don't care about having somebody stick their hand down their top on a night out because they're tough. And there's this sort of characterisation of working class women like they're all Nancy from Oliver, and they're all sort of tough and bawdy and running around in corsets and not caring if people treat them badly. And that really frustrates me, because whether you are aristocratic or you're living on the breadline in an inner city council estate, either way you have equal right to not be sexually assaulted. And I think it bothers you as much that either way you're not tougher because of where you come from. I do think that feminism does have a problem with being too white and sometimes too middle class. I think the main problem is that we've seen from the statistics that came out last week, the majority of journalists are middle class. So the majority of the writing that's done about feminism is done by middle-class women. In theory, feminism should help women who don't have much money more than anybody else, because it should be creating a situation where you can both work and have a family, which is probably the greatest problem facing women. But in practice, it can often be more about allowing beautiful white women to put pictures of themselves in bikinis on Instagram and hashtag it feminism? Why aren't more women on the boards of FTSE 500 companies? But actually we should be thinking about why aren't women who are working in low-skilled jobs being paid better and having better working conditions?
So one of the criticisms of the hashtag #MeToo movement, but also the more general discussion about sexual harassment, is that what it's done is not honed in on the areas in which sexual harassment is still an issue, but turned everything into a problem. So we've had discussions about whether or not jokes should be allowed, whether or not staring should be allowed, wolf whistling, all these wider issues that isn't your kind of classic example, stereotypical example of someone being assaulted.
I think the sad reality of the Me Too movement is I don't think it's changed most people's lives at all on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes these things are over-reported. So this week I read an article that claimed that handshakes were going to be banned in the workplace, and actually what it turned out is that somebody who ran an HR company had suggested that that might happen. So nobody's actually going to do it, but you get great click-through if you put a headline saying people no longer allowed to shake hands. I don't think we're having a moral panic at all. I think what we're having is an overcorrection in the wrong direction.
Me and Rebecca have had this debate many times, and I agree with her on the criticisms of contemporary feminism and how it's not as inclusive as it could be. But on the positive side, especially when we talked about hashtag #MeToo, I just do not agree that it hasn't changed much. I think the problem with contemporary feminism is, at its heart, it's asking women to be afraid of sex and afraid of men. As well as sexual harassment, many contemporary feminists argue that women are still oppressed in their daily lives. From sexist comments in the workplace to the gender pay gap, apparently this negatively affects women's career choices. But are we really still oppressed by men? Emily Hill, journalist and author of Bad Romance, prefers the more old-school version of feminism, the Camille Palliers and the Germaine Greers of this world. So Emily, thanks for having me today.
Thank you for coming.
I'm right in saying that you do still call yourself a feminist, and what is it about that kind of kick-ass old-school feminism that you want to hang on to?
So I do still call myself a feminist, as you said. I'm starting to question why. When I was young, feminism really helped me because I wasn't really expected to get anywhere, and reading feminist works really kind of made me think that I could kind of defeat whatever opposition was foolish enough to stand in my way. The thing that really troubles me most about modern feminists is their complete ignorance of the women who've come before them. Most, if not all, of the privileges that they enjoy today have been because of the fights that were entered into on their behalf. And what we have to face as women today is not nearly in any vicinity to what your mother or my mother or grandmother would have had to overcome.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that whereas the feminism of the past, 60s, 70s, 80s, was more based in quite hardcore political theory, it had demands, it was very radical, some of them, the classic bra burning, but also marching for abortion rights, being quite strident. Do you think that's been lost today in today's contemporary feminism that seems to pick up on things like personal habits, language, politically correct culture?
What the feminism I subscribe to, the feminism that's helped me in my life, the feminism that I would like to champion today and see championed today is about liberty and equality, not about what is happening, which is a regression, I would say, in terms of we're women, we're not handicapped in any way. We can fight our own battles, and I'm not saying that we don't encounter prejudice, because I think in certain circumstances we do, the orgasm gap, the pay gap, but those issues should be tackled by ourselves. I think it's disempowering to have all these rules imposed on everything so women are protected. Like, we're not children. We do not need to be protected, and we need to stand up for ourselves. And I know a lot of feminists will say, oh, well, some women aren't able to do that. I wasn't able to do that in my 20s. I'm sure I was paid a hell of a lot less than the men. But that's a question of teaching women how to stand up for themselves, because it's better to win your own battles. And everybody who's alive has a certain amount of problems. And I think that Camille Paglia has a point when she says that bourgeois culture has just infiltrated everything. And so minor things, even the minor things, certain women who've never had to encounter any kind of prejudice or anything will kind of appeal to other, sort of appeal to the referee. Like, like on a football pitch, if somebody, fouled you, you'd appeal to the referee. Actually, it's life, so just kick them back.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about sex, and it's something that you...
Sex
is something that you address alongside relationships, intimacy, other things in Bad Romance. But what I wanted to ask you, because a lot of the characters in your book and the way that you talk about feminism, very much championing a kind of forceful, forthright view of feminism,
yes.
of women owning their space.
Yes.
In relation to sex, do you think that feminism is making women more fearful of it?
Yes, I one of the things I really worry about is the quality of sex among young women. Sex is risky. Sex is interesting and intriguing and strange. So I'm not kind of belittling the idea that things can go very, 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 very wrong.
Me Too, #MeToo is divided opinion. How do you feel about it? Do you sign up to it? Do you have criticisms of it?
Okay, so first of all, I was a Me Tooer. I was like, yeah, me too, that's happened to me too. Yeah, and I like that because I think women have been silenced for very many years in various ways. We don't feel we can say certain things, and certain things have happened to us and affect us. And I was thinking, yes, me too. And at the time, that was about Harvey Weinstein, who was a very powerful man in Hollywood, who routinely raped, abused, sexually assaulted women. It was a very serious issue. For me, it was a free speech issue. We have equivalents in our culture, for instance, Philip Green, and we couldn't print that because of his lawyers and because of the newspaper culture that exists here. But my problem with Me Too is it's gone from this very serious discussion of actually the really harmful, nasty stuff that has happened to women, that women have been silenced about, into more trivial things where a kiss has gone wrong, a pass has gone wrong. I don't agree that men should force themselves on women in any respect whatsoever. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is a clumsy pass is something that you should deal with yourself. You should say, I don't want that. Stop it. Knee him the balls, if possible. I'm not saying he doesn't get away with it, but you should do that yourself. And just Me Tooing people, and it's ultimately, this is the whole problem I have with modern feminism as it is. It's disempowering.
What aspects of contemporary feminism do you think is encroaching on women's ability to be assertive? Is it the kind of obsession with body image? Is it the panic about sex? Is it the idea of the kind of men step aside so that women can, get a leg up?
I just think contemporary feminism is all about rescuing women. So that's my main problem with modern feminism. I don't understand it. I don't understand why I walk into Waterstones and I find this table of feminist books and the first one says feminists don't wear pink and other lies. Who gives the flying fuck about pink? Nobody cares about that. That's not a feminist issue. I worry about young women today reading the dross that masquerades as feminist thought and ultimately thinking, well, I'm a victim, I can't do anything, or what am I going to do? Oh, woe with me, How is that helpful? I think that we're winning, I genuinely do, and I'm not ashamed of that, and I think it's kind of glorious.
I've come to meet a group of young women to find out whether or not they think feminism is still relevant. So, according to contemporary feminism, women are still oppressed by men. We're threatened by men. Men keep us down. Do you think that is the case in general?
Definitely. Because it is still a man's world.
What do you mean by that? So, have you ever not been able to do something because a man's had his boot on your throat?
Yeah, of course. I feel like if it was work, especially work, and we were in a situation where it was a woman against a man in a job, no doubt he would get the job and he would get paid more. Women, we bring ourselves down, but then men, they just sell themselves.
Yeah.
So I feel like the issue is that we are selling ourselves short.
If you were pitted against a man and woman who had the same same skill set or the same experience, who would get the job? Most likely a man.
But to your point, like in that I'm looking to ask for a pay rise like this coming week, I was looking online at ways to go about getting a pay rise, and actually in those articles they're pitting men against women, just saying like men ask for them, they're more prepared when they go into those interviews, whereas women are just like, I feel like I need it. But men are like, no, this is how much value I've added, this is how much this, that and the other. But I was offended by that article.
Well, the pay gap is a contentious issue. The data's all screwy. Yeah. But essentially what they do is they conflate different levels. So they put a woman who's on part-time for whatever reason against the guy who's on full-time. And of course it's going to come up short.
That's not fair.
And the more important thing that people don't know is that women in their 20s and 30s today are out-earning men. And the third thing to perhaps completely blow your minds is the thing that really doesn't get discussed, and maybe this is part of contemporary feminism's problem, is when women do get penalised is when they leave work to have a baby.
Right.
And that's by choice because, or you know, they can, there is provisions, there's childcare provisions, very small extent, but it will cost you a bomb. So a lot of women choose to go home and have the baby. That isn't addressed. So do you think feminists might use that as a bit of a lazy get-out to say, oh, there's a pay gap, when actually it's quite a difficult picture?
I work in the creative industry, and the pay thing isn't whether you're male or female, it's if you're good at your job.
In my industry, men were still earning more than women here, and we actually had a discussion on Women's Day where we had a panel of women, and a lot of our women at top are the CEOs and the COOs, and that's incredible, but a lot of them, if you look at them, don't have children, and so that was a big discussion point. They were like, did you feel at some point you had to choose between children or a career? And quite a few of them who didn't have children said yes, and I feel that maybe that's something I felt because I didn't have a child that benefited me. And there was one woman who was a high up person, and she said, I do have a child, and I felt that it really impacted my job as a mum.
The last place that I worked, men and women could take the same amount of paternity leave and be paid for the same amount. So there were men just going for 9 months, like 6 months, a year. And it was just amazing. They'd come back and they did leave after because they didn't get the promotions that they wanted.
Part of the thing that I've been questioning is whether or not the contemporary feminist outlook patronises women.
Coming here today, I would have said that I'm a feminist because I think I am, because feminism to me means men are equal to women. However, I feel like it's gone a lot further than that, and it's not just about that now. I feel like there's a lot more to it than just we're equal.
You think it's further in a bad way?
In a bad way, yeah. For example, you know, if you call a woman babe, that's, you know, you can't say that to a woman because she might take it the wrong way. Me personally, I don't think that's a bad thing. As long as you're treating me and speaking to me with respect, that's totally fine.
What do you think about that, Tia? In terms of language has been something that contemporary feminism has really honed in on, to the point at which now they're kind of saying at some universities, at some workplaces, there are regulations which say you cannot use terms like babes or housewife or sweetheart or darling. And while that might come from a place of wanting to show respect, do you think that there's a benefit to that, or has that gone too far?
I think it's a bit ridiculous. I think that there's a lot of pressure on how you should address a woman, and I think a lot of people, I just think that they're quite over the top about it. And it all depends on your culture and where you're from, because I'm from Essex and everybody calls everybody babe.
People from Ireland are still coming all the way to England to have abortions, and we're worrying about babes.
I want us to be focusing on, can I walk home alone at night and not have to send my friends my location to make sure I'm home okay?
Well, Melissa, the question about sexual harassment has been central to contemporary feminism and #MeToo. But so let's just talk a bit more about how women react to that, because I think we'd all agree that there still are questions about how men and women experience life differently, you know, fear and things like that. But contemporary feminism says we've got to make wolf whistling illegal. We've got to have policemen watching women on the street to protect them. We've got to bring in laws that ban all sorts of stuff. Do you think that that hampers and restricts your ability to say, shut up on the street, and feel like a strong woman who can react? Do you think there's a tension there and a difference?
See, it's hard for me because I feel that I'm a feminist because I'm so pro-woman. But if a guy said to me, marry me, and you don't have to work because I make enough, I'd be like, I'd quit my job. so I think it's so, wolf whistling is bad, but sometimes I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
No,
Sometimes I love it.
I think it
If I know I'm
it
looking...
belittles me, it demeans me. Like,
Yeah.
I think it
What do you think, Charlotte?
I'll say that to my friend. I'll be like, oh, I got wolf whistled, motherfuckers. Like, I don't like them. That was
Yeah,
bad.
I get angry
but
about
then,
it.
actually, in myself, I'd be like, yeah, I look good today.
Like, there are bigger things to worry about than a creepy man who wants to do a wolf whistle. Like, there are bigger things going
No,
on.
but I agree to that point. I do think, obviously, there's the bigger issue, but by
It's not right
encouraging
by
that,
any
it's
means,
just
yeah.
encouraging that
But there should be
behaviour
a
in
law
man.
about it. There should be a law that says this shouldn't
I don't
happen.
think
Hang on, why shouldn't there be a law?
Because we're big enough to sort it out ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Like,
don't think there's-
I've got a head on my neck. Like, I'm navigating this life myself. I don't need that white guy in a suit to decide that for me. I'm strong enough.
And
Thank you
feminists
very
are saying that they're strong, independent women, but they feel like they need someone to look after them. I feel like it's kind of contradicting
Yeah.
themselves
They
a
need a
little
law.
bit.
They need a law to look
Like,
after
if you're a
them.
strong, independent woman, tell
Say
them to fuck
something,
off.
yeah.
Like,
No, but
it's-
then some women feel like they couldn't say no.
Don't get me
So
wrong,
then
it makes
that's
me
where we
yeah,
maybe
it makes
need a
me
law
feel
in place.
uncomfortable when I don't like it.
And I absolutely hate it. I become so embarrassed when somebody does it to me. None of that really ever happens. But when it does, something that I've really noticed since living in London, on a night out, a guy, like, if a guy comes up to me, he'll grab my arse, and it really annoys me because I turn around and then on occasion I grab their cock and they freak out. If you can touch my arse, why can't I touch your dick? Like, don't ever feel like you can come up to me and touch me. You do not have permission.
That's a very strong, and I would applaud that reaction. Well, Melissa, you said that you sometimes enjoy wolf whistling. I mean, that will get you kicked out of some feminist groups that I know. But do you think that shows that there's a problem with contemporary feminism? It's quite narrow, so you have to be almost like the right kind of woman, the right kind of feminist, which sometimes can be a bit down on sex.
I think it's because I come from like an African background where
Yeah.
men rule. You have it too because you come from your
Yeah, my
dad's
family
like-
are quite
your dad's
traditional,
king,
yeah.
and well, not king, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I kind of like the feeling of a guy just like looking after me. Like I'm a strong woman, and I will kick as much
Yeah,
as
but
I
what
can.
about fancying you? And what about, like, looking at you and being like, yeah, I want to fuck you? How does that make you feel when you walk down the street and that happens?
I'm like, yeah.
She
bitch.
loves it. She absolutely loves it.
I'm good today.
But let's push this a bit further. So, but do you think that which is your private choice, right? That's your personal life.
Yeah.
Do you think that should be politicised, or do you think that feminism should get on with, or a women's movement, whatever it's called, maybe it won't be called feminism in the future, should get on with dealing with other things that are bigger than you, rather than just being like, this isn't, you're living your life the wrong way.
I think the thing is as well, like, the thing to focus on is it always depends on the woman and how she reacts to different things, because, you know, like, some women are a lot more confident than other women, and I know that if I was walking down the street and somebody approached me, I wouldn't be able to hold my own, and I can admit that, and you know, my self-esteem and my strength wouldn't be enough to help me in that situation. So I think they need to focus more on maybe not bringing out laws, but just showing what the stigma is and advertising it everywhere. You know, you've got public transport, you've got social media, you've got things, you know, obviously you've got the Me Too movement, but they need to do more to say what is right and what is wrong. And I think that would be a really good start, to be honest.
There are some very fundamental things that women still get held back on. Abortion is one of them. I mean, in law, we have the 1967 Act, which allows us to have an abortion on the sign-off of a doctor. In law, women's bodies are not their own. None of us own our bodies. That's something that can be, that's something that can be very quickly changed tomorrow. But I think for me, the thing is that contemporary feminism, and the reason I have a problem with it, is it opposes us almost like children. So we have to have the support of politicians, we have to have the support of policemen, of, you know, our nice feminist male friends who will step aside to let us in, or give us a leg up, or things like that. And when it comes down to the fights that we will have to have in the future, you have to have women that really feel strong in themselves to do that, and you have to, you know, genuinely empowered and feel like they can take on the world. That kind of old school kick-ass, not going to take any nonsense feminism. I worry that we've lost that, and instead what we're saying to women is, when you go out, be afraid because men are waiting around the corner. When you go into a club, be afraid because if someone grabs your ass, you will fall in a heap and you won't be able to deal with that. When you go to work, your boss is going to be sexist, so be afraid. It's just so much fear. And where does that leave women? For me, if we can get these mainly middle-class campaigners to just kind of buzz off for a bit and actually say, what is it? I mean, I wrote a book, What Women Want. What is it that women want? Let's put that front and centre rather than telling us what we need to do. Over 100 years ago, women like Sylvia Pankhurst and Mary Wollstonecraft stood here in London's East End and fought for women's freedom. Now, I've spoken to women on all sides of the debate in relation to feminism, but I think my problem with contemporary feminism is that too often it feels like it's arguing for women to be safe and protected and not to argue for us to be free. Now, safety and freedom are two very different things. But women still do need to fight. We need to fight for our abortion rights, which are still restricted in this country and across the world. We need to fight for better provision of childcare. And yes, sometimes we still do get catcalled, and that's wrong. But instead of contemporary feminism or victim feminism, what about freedom? Now that is an F word I could get on board with.